Protecting South Korea's sovereignty, Seoul launches its Dokdo defense drill in the East Sea amid its tensions with Japan. This year's exercise involves a record number of forces from all three armed services, as well as the Marine Corps and Coast Guard. A rare disagreement. U.S. President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe failed to see eye to eye on North Korea's recent missile launches. Trump doesn't see a major issue. Abe says they violate UN sanctions. Plus, yet another weekend of chaos in Hong Kong. Police officers brandished guns during the worst unrest yet. Dozens of protesters are detained. Our top story this morning, South Korea wraps up its two-day maritime drill to defend the country's easternmost islets of Dokdo. Later today, the government says it will review the time and scale of their second drill, which will be held later this year. Oh Jung-hee starts us off.
South Korea's twice-yearly maritime drill to defend the country's easternmost islets of Dokdo ends on Monday. The drill, which involves the Navy, Marines, Air Force, and Coast Guard, started on Sunday, only 4 days after Seoul decided to pull out of its bilateral intel-sharing pact with Japan. The size of the armed forces is double that of previous drills. 10 warplanes and 10 warships have been deployed, one of which is Seoul's first Aegis-equipped destroyers, Haejongdo Great, included in the drill for the first time. As soon as the drill wraps up Monday afternoon, the government is to review the time and scale of their second drill of this year. The drills usually take place in June and December every year, but the first drill was delayed until now due to concerns that it could worsen Seoul's relationship with Tokyo. Some say the next drill could be held earlier than usual, as Japan could voice its claims over Dokdo. The drills, which are usually named Dokdo Defense Drill, were named EC Territory Defense Exercise this year. The name change is to show that Seoul is keeping China and Russia in check as well. Last month, a Russian airplane intruded into South Korean airspace over Dokdo twice, and 2 Chinese and Russian aircraft entered South Korea's air defense identification zone. The name EC Territory Defense Exercise reflects the military's determination to defend the country's territories in the EC and is likely to be used for the time being. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to their report, South Korea's presidential office says the annual maritime defense exercise in the East Sea is a drill aimed at guarding South Korea's sovereignty and territory. Speaking to reporters Sunday, a spokesperson for the top office said the exercise is aimed at boosting military capabilities against any potential threats from all forces, not just from Japan. The spokesperson added various factors, including weather conditions, had been taken into consideration for this year's exercise. South Korea's drill was swiftly criticized by Japan. Tokyo's foreign ministry called the exercises unacceptable and falsely claimed Dokdo is an inherent part of the territory of Japan. Now, there doesn't really seem to be much they disagree upon, but US President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe were at odds on Sunday over the seriousness of North Korea's recent series of short-range missile launches. Abe called the launches clear violations of UN sanctions, while Mr. Trump stuck to his line that they do not violate any kind of agreement. Lee Seung-jae has this report.
Holding a one-on-one meeting on the sidelines of the G7 meeting in France on Sunday, it quickly became clear that the leaders of the U.S. and Japan had opposing views on North Korea's latest missile tests.
So our position is very clear that the launch of short-range ballistic missile by North Korea clearly violates the relevant UN Security Council resolution. So in that sense, it was extremely regrettable for us to experience another round of missile launches by North Korea.
However, according to President Trump, the regime's missile tests were not a violation of UN Security Council resolutions.
I'm not happy about it. But again, he's not in violation of an agreement.
The comments come after North Korea's 7th missile test since Trump and Kim met at the DMZ between the two Koreas in June. While the launches have complicated attempts to restart talks between Washington and Pyongyang, Trump said he remained confident North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will do what he says is the right thing.
I have confidence that in the end, Kim Jong-un, who I've gotten to know very well, will do the right thing. I feel that he will do the right thing. I think it's to his advantage to do the right thing.
It's not the first time the two leaders have not seen eye to eye on North Korea. Trump has previously downplayed North Korea's missile provocations, despite Abe's concerns during the U.S. leader's visit to Tokyo in May. However, there was an issue the two leaders could get behind. Trump announced that he and Abe had agreed in principle to a new trade deal that will likely be signed when the two sides meet again at the UN General Assembly in September. The deal means Japan will buy excess U.S. corn, and such purchases would be carried out by the private sector. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer says the deal would open up markets to over $7 billion worth of goods and covered agriculture, industrial tariffs, and digital trade. 이승재, Arirang News.
Now, during his sit-down with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Sunday, US President Donald Trump revealed he received a new letter from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, adding Kim was upset that South Korea was engaging in what Kim called war games, despite Trump acknowledging the recent joint military exercises between Seoul and Washington were a modified version compared to previous large-scale drills. The US president still labeled them a total waste of money. Trump said he would recommend against holding the exercises, but will allow the allies to continue if necessary. North Korea's state-run media says the regime successfully tested a super-large, multiple rocket launcher under the supervision of its leader Kim Jong-un. Following the North's launch of 2 projectiles on Saturday, the Korean Central News Agency reported the North was able to verify the technical parameters of their new missile system. Kim reportedly said North Korea must focus on new strategic and tactical weapons to counter the, quote, threat, ever-mounting military threat and pressure from hostile forces. Now, in other news, South Korea's ruling party and the government have pledged to draw up an expansionary budget plan for next year. In a final review that happened this morning, they agreed to actively use fiscal measures given the headwinds facing the country at the moment. The call will be focused on breathing life into the economy, coping with Japan's export curbs and boosting the livelihoods of the people. Seoul's finance chief said last week that the budget would be worth roughly $420 billion, a hike of about 9% on year. Over $1.6 billion will be set aside for the parts and materials sectors to help them develop homegrown tech and reduce their dependency on Japan. The government will finalise the budget at Thursday's cabinet meeting and submit it to the National Assembly on September 3rd. Now, recent government data on household income here in South Korea shows that inequality between the top and bottom 20% brackets have reached a new high. After being on the receiving end of a wave of harsh media criticism, South Korea's presidential office responded on Sunday, insisting the figures are not a true reflection of what's actually happening in the country. Oh Soo-young with the details.
The presidential office of Cheong-adae insists income inequality in South Korea has not worsened despite recent government data that paints a different picture. Statistics Korea's second quarter data released last week seems to indicate the worst level of household income inequality in more than a decade. Between April and June, the average household earned around $3,900 a month, up 3.8% on year. However, the monthly income for the bottom 20% income bracket remained unchanged from the year before, averaging $1,090. The top 20% earned nearly $7,800 a month on average, marking a 3.2% increase compared to the same period in 2018. This comes despite the Moon Jae-in administration's push to generate income-driven growth for the country. Cheong-adae defended its efforts. The top office's senior secretary for economic affairs Lee Ho-sung said Sunday that the average income for the bottom 20% bracket was no longer in the red, which he said should be viewed positively. He said various policy efforts, such as strengthening social safety nets, has had a positive effect, and the average household income level for 2018 to 2019 is comparatively higher than previous years. The official added some $33 billion will be set aside for next year's government budget, nearly half of which will be invested in social welfare. Jinyoung, Arirang News.
Now, as you can see there, South Korea has economic difficulties of its own to cope with, but warnings that signal an impending global recession measured as 2 consecutive quarters of contraction are blaring around the world as we speak. Our business correspondent Kim Hae-sung has this report on the signals to look out for and the reasons for the global slowdown.
The U.S. bond market is sounding the alarm of a possible recession. The spread between the 2-year Treasury yield and the 10-year yield inverted for the first time since 2007 on August 14th.
An inverted yield curve is a bellwether for an economic recession. Long-term bills have higher risk premiums and therefore lower yields. But a higher 10-year yield means investors believe they will make more by holding a long-term treasury, expecting the value of short-term bills to plunge as the economy slows.
According to Credit Suisse, the last 5 inverted yield curves all led to recessions that happened an average of 22 months following an inversion. Britain also saw an inverted yield curve, and Germany's treasury bond yields are heading further down into negative territory. The price of gold, the go-to safe haven for many investors, is at a 6-year high. The real economy is also losing steam. China saw its second quarter growth hit its slowest pace in near 30 years. South Korea recorded negative growth in the first quarter. 2 other export powerhouses, Germany and Singapore, also saw their economies contract in the second quarter on falling global demand. While the U.S. is still enjoying solid economic growth, its manufacturing August PMI fell below the 50 mark for the first time since 2009, indicating a near-term manufacturing contraction.
The problem of low productivity and the widening wealth gap remains unsolved since the 2008 global financial crisis. Interest rates are at record lows, yet supply is higher than demand. In addition, new factors like the U.S.-China trade war are accelerating the slowdown.
The U.S.-China trade spat has not only led to higher tariffs between the world's 2 largest economies, hurting consumers and exports, but also added uncertainties to businesses, driving down investment. A no-deal Brexit pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong and tensions between South Korea and Japan also add to downside risks. It remains to be seen whether the warning signs will lead to a recession, but rising populist sentiment and protectionism is making it harder for world leaders to work in unison to support the global economy. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Now in sports, South Korea's world #1 female golfer Ko Jin-young has added another victory to her already impressive 2019 season, winning the 2019 CP Women's Open in Ontario, Canada on Sunday after firing an impressive 7-under 65 in the second round and sharing the lead going into the final 18 holes. The South Korean star shot an even more impressive 8-under to finish the tournament at 26 under, 5 strokes ahead of the runner-up. The win gives her 4 victories on the tour this season, including 2 major titles. The pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong on Sunday, one of the worst and most violent nights seen over the 12 weekends now of turmoil there. Police used their strongest force yet with water cannons coming out, tear gas, and even a warning gunshot fired, we believe, into the air. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Kim Da-mi. So Da-mi, tell us more about this increasingly concerning situation.
Right, Mark. Hong Kong police deployed water cannons and live ammunition, a warning shot for the first time on Sunday. Hundreds of thousands of protesters poured onto the streets and clashed with the police in the new territories. Police accused the demonstrators of throwing bricks, which prompted them to fire tear gas and water cannons. A police officer fired at least one gunshot, almost for the first time in 3 months of protest. Police said an officer had fired into the air because he felt his life was threatened. It was unclear where the shot was aimed, but it was fired toward the sky. On Sunday, a senior Hong Kong official hinted at mainland China possibly intervening militarily to quell the protests. Maria Tam, deputy director of the Hong Kong Basic Law Committee, said soldiers stationed close to Hong Kong are not strawmen meant to just stay in the garrison. They're an important part of the one country, two systems. The protests began in June over a controversial but now scrapped extradition law. The demonstrations now focus on greater democratic freedoms, including an inquiry into alleged police brutality. The White House says President Trump regrets not raising tariffs higher on Chinese goods as the trade war between Washington and Beijing intensifies by the day. White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham clarified Trump's comments at the G7 summit on Sunday, where he said he had second thoughts about everything. Grisham said this didn't mean he regrets placing the tariffs, but rather about not taking stronger measures against Beijing. The remarks come after Trump declared a tariff hike on Chinese goods in response to Beijing's decision last Friday to place $75 billion worth of duties on U.S. imports. Joe Walsh, a former Illinois congressman and conservative radio show host, has revealed he's going to run for the Republican nomination and bid to challenge President Trump ahead of the 2020 presidential election. Announcing his bid, Walsh said Trump was a guy in the White House who is completely unfit to be president, and claimed that everyone in the Republican Party believes Trump is not fit for the job. Walsh becomes the second Republican candidate for the nomination, following Bill Weld, a former Massachusetts governor. However, watchers say a primary challenge to Trump is very unlikely to actually succeed. Brazil has deployed firefighters and military troops to the Amazon as massive wildfires devastate the world's largest tropical rainforest. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro ordered military means on Sunday to battle the fires in 7 states along the Amazon. French President Emmanuel Macron said on Sunday that G7 countries, including the U.S. and Italy, were finalizing a possible deal on technical and financial help on fighting the fires. Often referred to as the lungs of the planet, the Amazon rainforest produces a fifth of the oxygen on Earth.
It is time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information useful, we hope anyway, for your everyday life. It's Monday, so we are going to focus mostly on health-related news today. And we have some welcome news for women, because starting from December, South Korea's national health insurance will cover ultrasound scans on ovaries and the uterus. The Health Ministry says it will include the 2 examinations within the range of subsidized medical procedures, reducing the burden for female patients. Costs for pelvic ultrasounds are currently paid in full by the patient, not covered by the National Health Insurance. The government has been aiming to reduce the cost of medical care for major diseases and conditions since August 2017 as part of the so-called Moon Care agenda. Now, it's a pretty established fact that too much of anything can be bad for you, especially elderly people, because they tend to take more medications than younger people, naturally, for chronic illnesses. And a recent study shows that this could raise the risk of an early death. This is especially true when many drugs are taken together when they really shouldn't be. Jinyoung has this report.
Taking multiple drugs at once may lead to a higher mortality risk. According to a recent report by the National Health Insurance Corporation, about half of people in South Korea who are 65 years or older consume more than 5 different medications every day. 6% were found to be taking more than 11. The same study shows seniors taking 5 or more kinds of drugs at once have a 25% higher mortality risk than those who take fewer. And for those taking more than 11 a day, it was 54% higher than those who take the fewest. An expert says because pharmacies and hospitals are easily accessible in South Korea, patients are more likely to end up taking multiple medications at once.
When multiple drugs are prescribed inappropriately, they can interact with each other and cause unexpected side effects. It's especially dangerous for elderly patients when they take many at once. The concentration of different medications in the body is higher for seniors because people's metabolic function slows down as they age.
He added that it's important for patients to consult with experts before they consume any medication. To prevent such side effects, the National Health Insurance Corporation is running a pilot project for the elderly. Doctors and pharmacists will visit patients who might be at risk and check what they are being prescribed. The service is being provided to those taking more than 10 different medications a day and for those with one of 13 designated conditions, including diabetes and heart disease. Jinyoung, Arirang News.
Now, before we get to the weather, let's squeeze some culture news in, shall we? South Korea's biggest royal palace is going to be open to visitors at night during next month's Chuseok holiday, also known as Korea's Thanksgiving. According to the Cultural Heritage Administration, from September 12th to the 15th, Gyeongbokgung Palace will stay open until 9:30 p.m. Tickets will be available on auction from this Friday. You can see the website address there. 4,500 people will be allowed in each night, with 550 spots reserved for foreigners and senior citizens. The palace will have these kind of nocturnal openings during 2 other periods this fall, from September 22nd to October 5th, and from October 20th to November 6th.
Good morning. Those in the south of the country will need their umbrellas or raincoats today. Rain clouds should spread to more parts of Jeju Island and the south coast as the day goes on. In fact, a heavy rain advisory has been issued for the southern and eastern parts of Jeju Island, and 20 to 200 millimeters of heavy showers will pour down on Jeju and the south coast. Temperature-wise, it is already that time of the year when we need to be aware of wide temperature differences. The gap between lows and highs can be over 10 degrees Celsius. But, it still feels quite warm in the afternoon, and daily highs today will be in the 30s this afternoon. Other regions will be under mostly sunny skies on this Monday. Jeju and southern provinces could see showers through Thursday, while the rest of the country will be sunny or partly cloudy, and temperatures will get cooler as the week goes on. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news and weather we have for now on this Monday morning here in Seoul. Do stay tuned to us on Arirang TV. And a reminder that our next newscast is coming up at noon Korea time in around an hour and a half from now. So until then, goodbye.